Welcome to the deep dive. Honestly, the amount of just misinformation out there about protein, it's enough to make your head spin sometimes.
Oh, absolutely.
I'm sure we've all fallen for a few of these myths. You hear these wild claims like, oh, I had 600 grams on Olympia prep.
Right. Those huge numbers.
Or that total myth that protein shakes take 3 years to digest. I mean, where does that even come from?
That was particularly strange.
And then there's always that fear, too much protein will damage your kidneys. It's no wonder people are just scratching their heads about something so basic, so crucial for building muscle.
It creates a lot of confusion, definitely.
So our mission today, we want to cut through all that noise, debunk some myths, and really arm you with the solid science-backed strategies for protein that actually work.
Get down to what the research actually says.
Exactly. This deep dive is all about getting your protein strategy dialed in. We're focusing on the how much, the what type, and when to eat it so you can build muscle effectively, efficiently.
Sounds good. Let's do it.
Okay, so let's jump right in. The foundation, really. When you're trying to build muscle, what actually makes one protein source better than another? What are we looking for?
Well, it's interesting because for a long time, scientists mainly looked at two key things to sort of rank how effective a protein is.
Okay.
First, there's digestibility. Basically, how much of the protein you eat can your body actually break down and, absorb and use?
Makes sense.
And the second thing is the amino acid content. Think of amino acids as the building blocks of protein. There are 20, but 9 are essential.
Right. The ones your body can't make.
Exactly. Your body can't produce them, so you have to get them from food. And they're absolutely fundamental for muscle building.
So digestibility and essential amino acids.
Yep. And when you look at sources that score really well on both those factors, it's pretty much what you'd expect. Protein powder, meat, fish, dairy products.
The usual suspects.
The usual suspects. And funny enough, human muscle also scores very high. But let's maybe not go down that road.
Yeah, let's skip the weird ideas. Okay, so that framework digestibility, amino acids, that seems pretty logical. But I've heard some buzz recently, some new research suggesting maybe that's not the whole story. Is there more to it?
That's a great point. And yeah, it brings us to something researchers are kind of calling the whole egg revelation. It's fascinating, actually.
Oh, interesting name. Tell me more.
So back in 2017, there was this study. They had people consume 18 grams of protein after a workout. One group got it from whole eggs, the other from just egg whites. Same amount of protein.
Okay.
Then they measured muscle protein synthesis, that's the signal, basically, for muscles to repair and grow. And surprisingly, the whole eggs triggered a significantly higher response.
Wow, even with the same protein amount.
Exactly, which, made researchers wonder, okay, does this bigger signal actually lead to more muscle growth over time?
Right, does it translate?
So a few years later, they did a follow-up study. This time, one group ate 20 grams of protein from 3 whole eggs after every workout for 12 weeks. The other group got the same 20 grams, but from 6 egg whites, so no yolk.
Okay, isolating the yolk's effect.
Pretty much. And importantly, both groups kept their total daily calories and protein similar overall. And after 12 weeks, the whole egg group, they showed significantly greater increases in strength, and they reduced their body fat percentage more.
Whoa.
Yeah. And there was also a really strong trend towards gaining more lean body mass, too. Now, we don't know exactly why the whole eggs were better. Maybe it's the cholesterol, maybe other nutrients in the yolk. We're still figuring that out.
So the yolk isn't the enemy?
It seems not. This whole egg revelation thing really kind of shatters that idea that it's only about protein quantity. It shows that how the protein is packaged, with all its natural partners in the food, might actually boost muscle growth significantly. It's the whole food matrix, not just the isolated protein.
Wow, okay. That is genuinely surprising. So the yolk, the part people often toss out, might actually be the secret sauce. That whole egg revelation really is a game changer. It makes you wonder, though, if the form of the protein matters that much, what does that mean for plant-based proteins? Because the perception is often that they're, less effective.
Yeah, you're right. That is the common thinking. And look, it's true that if you just look at those traditional scores, digestibility, essential amino acids, plant sources often rank a bit lower.
Right.
And they might give you a slightly lower immediate protein synthesis response right after you eat them compared to, say, whey or meat.
Okay.
However, and this is where it gets really interesting, that initial protein synthesis spike doesn't always perfectly predict long-term muscle growth.
Ah, okay. So short-term signal versus long-term results.
Exactly. Which led researchers in 2021, I think it was, to do a direct comparison. They took one group on a vegan diet using soy protein supplements and a variety of plant sources, and another group on a diet primarily based on animal protein. Both groups trained for 12 weeks.
And the results.
This is the surprising part. Both diets led to similar increases in muscle size and strength.
Really? Similar gains on vegan versus animal-based.
Yep. And actually, we saw a similar finding in another study that was published just this year. So it seems pretty consistent.
So what's the catch for plant-based then?
Well, the researchers really highlighted two critical things for getting those results on a plant-based diet. One, you absolutely have to make sure you're eating enough total protein every single day.
Hitting that overall target.
Hitting the target. And two, you need to spread that protein out properly throughout the day. Those seem to be the non-negotiables.
Okay, so planning is key.
Definitely. Which actually brings us perfectly to the next big question.
Indeed. We've talked about the types of protein, eggs, plants, the usual suspects. But for so many people, I think the biggest question is just how much? What's that sweet spot? The optimal daily amount to really fuel muscle growth without going overboard.
Right. The quantity question. Well, probably the best evidence we hear on this comes from a huge meta-analysis, looked at 49 different studies.
Okay, that's comprehensive.
It really is. And it found that, yeah, adding more protein generally did significantly increase muscle mass on average. People gained about 0.66 pounds more muscle over the studies.
So more protein equals more muscle, generally.
Generally, yes. But, and this is really key for you listening, there was a clear point where the benefits plateaued, a point of diminishing returns.
Ah, okay. So there's a ceiling.
Exactly. The analysis showed that protein intakes above around 0.73 grams per pound of your body weight per day didn't really lead to any additional muscle growth.
0.73 grams per pound.
Yeah. Think of it like watering a plant. Right? Up to a certain point, more water helps it grow. But beyond that optimal amount, adding more water doesn't make it grow any faster. It just kind of runs off.
Good analogy.
For muscle growth, that sort of saturation point seems to be around that 0.73 grams per pound mark. So like for an average 180-pound person, that's roughly 130 grams of protein a day.
130 grams.
Okay. And it's important to remember that's for maximizing growth. Right. You can definitely still build muscle if you're eating less than that. So don't get discouraged if 130 sounds like a lot right now.
Okay, that's good to know. That 0.73 is the top end for maximizing, not necessarily the bare minimum.
Precisely. But what about when you're cutting? When you're in a calorie deficit, trying to lose fat, your body's more likely to break down muscle for energy then, isn't it? Do you need more protein in that situation?
Yeah, that's a common question. Protect the muscle you have while dieting.
It is. And look, there's pretty strong speculative evidence suggesting that, yes, a higher protein intake could help prevent muscle loss when you're in a deficit, especially if you're already quite lean or if you're dieting pretty aggressively.
Okay, so maybe bump it up a bit then.
That's the general thinking. Unfortunately, we don't have like a perfect head-to-head study that tells us exactly how much higher is optimal in a deficit. It's still an area of research.
Gotcha. So more evidence needed for a precise number there.
Right. So based on everything we know, here are some sort of general daily recommendations for you. If you're maintaining weight or you're in a surplus trying to gain, aim for that minimum of 0.73 grams per pound of body weight per day.
The maximizing target.
A maximizing target. Going higher is totally safe. It can even help you feel fuller, manage hunger. I probably wouldn't push much past, say, 1.2 grams per pound.
Why is that?
Because at that point, those extra calories from protein might actually be better spent on carbohydrates to fuel your workouts, improve performance.
Ah, okay. Resource allocation.
Exactly. Now, if you're in a deficit trying to lose fat, it's probably wise to be a bit more cautious, protect that muscle. So maybe consider bumping that minimum up to around 1 gram per pound of body weight per day, especially if you're relatively lean to begin with.
1 gram per pound when cutting. Okay.
And there's an important little nuance here, particularly if you have a higher body fat percentage. Let's say maybe over 30% for men, 40% for women.
Right, because grams per pound might overestimate needs then.
Precisely. Calculating based on total body weight might give you an unnecessarily high protein target. So in those cases, using grams per lean count is better, but that can be tricky to estimate. A simpler way, a good proxy, is to take your height in centimeters and aim for that number in grams of protein per day.
Height in centimeters equals grams of protein.
Yeah, so if you're 180 centimeters tall, aim for around 180 grams of protein. It's just a quick way to scale protein needs to your frame size, essentially, without overdoing it based on fat mass.
That's a really practical tip. Makes those numbers much more approachable for everyone. Now, hitting 130 grams or 180 grams or whatever your target is, that might sound expensive to some people. Is getting enough protein always as costly as it seems?
Yeah, that's a common concern, the cost factor.
Mm.
And protein can be pricey, depending on the source, but it's not always the case.
Oh.
Like take protein powder, for example. If you buy it in bulk, the cost per gram of protein can actually be surprisingly affordable, often comparable to things like eggs, milk, or even canned tuna.
Really? Comparable to tuna?
Yeah, often it is, especially the big tubs. And beyond just the cost, protein powder is just incredibly convenient, right?
It's true. Very easy.
Usually tastes pretty good these days, mixes easily, and it doesn't typically come loaded with extra fat or calories like some other sources, like fatty cuts of meat might.
Good point.
So it can genuinely make hitting that daily protein target much easier and more sustainable for you without breaking the bank necessarily.
Okay, that's reassuring. So we know the best types, or at least that type matters more than we thought. We know roughly how much we need, both for bulking and cutting, and we know it doesn't have to cost a fortune. Now, the final piece of this puzzle. How should you actually eat that protein throughout the day? Does timing, does distribution matter for maximizing growth?
Right, the distribution question. This gets into how our bodies actually handle protein intake. So basically, every time you eat a decent amount of protein, your muscle protein synthesis, that growth signal we talked about, it increases. But here's the kicker. That stimulating effect seems to max out. Research suggests it plateaus at around 20 to 30 grams of high-quality protein in a single serving for most people.
So eating like 50 grams at once doesn't give a bigger signal than 30 grams.
Pretty much. Think of it like flicking a light switch. Once the light's on, flicking the switch harder or faster doesn't make the light any brighter. The signal has been sent.
Got it. Max effect around 20, 30 grams.
Yeah. And after that initial surge, your muscles seem to enter what's called a refractory period, kind of a rest period, where they become less responsive to more protein for at least a couple of hours.
Okay, so you can't just keep triggering it constantly back to back.
Doesn't seem like it.
Yeah.
And this is exactly where the idea of protein distribution comes in. Theoretically, the thinking goes, if you space out your protein intake relatively evenly throughout the day, you might be able to keep those muscle protein synthesis levels elevated more consistently, like providing a more continuous signal for your muscles to grow, rather than just big spikes followed by long lulls.
Okay, that makes theoretical sense. Is there actual evidence for it?
There is some. A study in 2020 looked at this. They had one group eat their protein unevenly, like low protein at breakfast, medium at lunch, high at dinner. The other group ate the same total amount, but spread it evenly across those 3 meals.
Yeah.
The evenly distributed group showed slightly more favorable results in terms of strength gains and lean mass increases.
Slightly more favorable.
Yeah, it wasn't a huge difference, and it's important to mention the study had limitations. The total protein intake was actually quite low overall, and the sample size wasn't massive. But it does provide some evidence suggesting that spreading protein across at least, say, 3 meals per day might offer a small benefit.
Okay, so maybe aim for at least 3 hits a day. What about more? Like 4, 5, 6 meals? Does that help even more?
Great question. Well, a later study actually compared spreading the daily protein across either 3 meals or 6 meals.
Okay, direct comparison.
Yeah. And after 8 weeks of training, they found no significant difference in muscle growth between the 3-meal and 6-meal groups.
Interesting. So 6 wasn't better than 3.
Apparently not, in that study at least. So based on that, my advice for you would be aim for a minimum of 3 protein-containing meals per day. That seems sensible. But beyond that, feel free to eat more frequently, 4, 5, 6 times, if that simply helps you personally hit your total daily protein target more easily or consistently. Don't stress about needing 6 meals if 3 works for your schedule and intake.
Okay, so aim for at least 3 more if it helps you hit the total. That simplifies things. Phew. We have covered a lot today.
You certainly have.
From, cutting through those initial myths to getting deep into the science. It's really interesting how much nuance there is, isn't there, in something that seems so simple, like just eating protein.
It really is.
It's not just what you eat or even just how much, but also when you eat, it potentially matters, even if that when has some flexibility. So just to recap for everyone listening, we talked about the best types of protein and that maybe the whole food matters, like the whole egg revelation.
Right, the food matrix idea.
And how plant-based options can absolutely match animal-based gains, provided you hit your totals and distribute it reasonably well.
Yep, totally achievable.
We honed in on that optimal daily amount around 0.73 grams per pound for maximizing growth, maybe bumping up towards 1 gram per pound when cutting.
And the height and centimeter trick for higher body fat percentages.
Yes, great practical tip. And we just covered the strategic importance of protein distribution, aiming for at least 3 meals. But remember, I think this is the key takeaway. Above all else, your total daily protein intake seems to be the most critical factor.
Absolutely. Nail that first.
Nail that first. So bringing all this together, maybe a final thought for our listeners.
Well, yeah. Given that muscle science is always evolving and everyone's body is a bit different, maybe the thought to leave you with is this. How can you take these principles we've discussed, the type, the amount, the timing, and adapt and refine them for your own unique goals, your body composition?
Personalized application.
Exactly. Think about how you can apply these insights, keep learning, and really optimize your own fitness journey, making what you learn today truly work best for you.